Hi guys, and welcome to episode 16 of my vinyl and music collection. And if you are liking these podcasts, please subscribe. It all helps. So we're going to have a little look at my punk and new wave collection. It's not huge. Punk was a type of genre where it was mainly singles, albums were bought. But if I remember rightly, it was all about the 45s. Anyway, gonna start off with my favourite post-punk band, and that would have been the Joy Division. This is their second album. They only released two albums. First album was called Unknown Pleasure. Really was a groundbreaking album with some great songs in it. One in particular was Shadowland, which was covered by the Killers. And there was no doubt that the Joy Division, they were absolutely influential to a lot of bands that came later, including the Killers themselves and many other indie type bands. The Joy Division consisted of Ian Curtis on vocals. He kind of composed most of the songs. Bernard Sumner, guitar. Peter Hook on bass. And Stephen Morris on drums. And they created the Joy Division because of a gig they went to in about 1976 in Manchester, and they went to see the Sex Pistols. Apparently the quote is that every person that went to that gig created a band, including the Buzzcocks. Anyway, this album is a well-crafted album for a post-punk album. It created new wave as well. And if you had to put a genre to it, I don't use the word avant-garde much. They use it for the Velvet Underground, but this would come close to avant-garde punk. It's a brilliant album. It's some brilliant musicianship on it. And I do love Peter Hook's bass playing. It's absolutely out of this world. And I met him at an airport once. We're coming back from Portugal with the Animals, and Peter Hook was there, and he recognised a couple of the Animals. And he's a lovely guy, and he came up to have a chat. Anyway, this is Joy Division, Closer. Second album released posthumously after the death of Ian Curtis. Ian Curtis was, he struggled a lot with bipolar, epilepsy. He was one of these really introverted characters, and the night before the US tour, he really didn't want to go on that, and he committed suicide at a very young age. I think he was 23. This is a great album, released, as I said, in 1980, posthumously, after the death of Ian Curtis. They made sure that the album was going to be quite bare, and it was quite shocking because they didn't realise that when they chose the cover picture, it was of a funeral scene, and they weren't going to actually use it, but they did. And it's a great album. And the first track, Ottawa City, Exhibition, Isolation, Passover, Colony, It Means to an End, which the editors, I think, cover that. Side 2, Heart and Soul, 24 Hours, The Eternal Decades. It's a great album, and it's got a great inner, obviously, and I often sit with it, and I think of Ian Curtis, and I think of the Joy Division. And for you that don't know, the Joy Division, after Ian Curtis had died, became New Order, and they were a nice new wave electronic band in the end. But anyway, that's the Joy Division. And this was a single which they were going to put on this album, and it's Love Will Tear Us Apart. And I think a lot of you might have heard of this song. It's an absolute heartbreaker of a song. It's Ian Curtis basically pouring his heart out, and just listen to the lyrics. It's enough to tell you that he wasn't well. Anyway, that's the Joy Division, Closer. CBGB's time now, and Blondie, and in 1977, 1978, 15 years of age, obviously all us young male teenagers, we all fell in love with Blondie. She was gorgeous, but one thing she actually was a great singer, a great front lady of a band, and oh my gosh, you know, this wasn't a greatest hits album, this was a studio album, and some of the tracks in here are so iconic. It is like a greatest hits. But anyway, side one consists of Hanging on the Telephone. That was a massive hit, this side and the other side of the Atlantic Ocean. One Way or Another, Picture This, Fade Away and Radiate, Pretty Baby, I Know But I Don't Know. The first three tracks were huge hits. Side two, 11.59, Will Anything Happen, great song as well, called, the third song is called Sunday Girl. Heart of Glass, and another brilliant hit again. I'm Gonna Love You, 2, and Just Go Away. Blondie, what a fantastic, originally a punk band discovered in CBGB's in New York, where many of the American punk bands were discovered, including the Ramones, Blondie, Talking Heads. The last 2 weeks, Blondie did lose their drummer, and I really did rate the drummer, and that was Clem Burke. What a brilliant drummer, a brilliant organizer of the band. He was a real professional. They were all real professionals, and they were a great band, and they consisted of Jimmy Deck on keyboards, Frank Infante on guitar, Chris Stein, who was Debbie Harry or Blondie's boyfriend for many years, guitar, 12-string and ebow, Neil Harrison on bass, and we had obviously Debbie Harry on vocals. A great album. First year this, as I said, when I was 14, 15 years of age. A great inner. We've got all the lyrics for the songs, and if you want to discover Blondie, I would recommend Parallel Lines. Absolute outstanding album. A Moment of Time, 1978, and it's I would say it's pop punk more than hardcore punk. Let's go back to the origins of punk, and no doubt one of my favourite punk bands were the Stranglers. This was their second album, and the Stranglers became absolutely huge. They wrote some great songs, and one of them was Golden Brown, which was a #1. I think it was huge in America as well. And once again, seasoned musicians who were about a couple of years before the punk scene started, so they were up and ready. This is called No More Heroes, and obviously the song No More Heroes is on here, and it's got a great little inner, and as you can see, we've got Hugh Cornwell by there in his punky pose, and we've got a rat amongst the roses. It's a great album. This was released in 1977, and some absolute great tracks in here. And side one would be I Feel Like A. I won't mention the 3 words after it. Check it out. Bitchin', Dead Ringer, Dagenham Dave, Bring On the Noddies, Something Better Than Change. Side 2, No More Heroes. That is my favourite song of the whole album, and that's the title track. Peasant in the Sky, Burning Up Time, English Towns, and School Ma'am. An absolute colossus of a punk album at the time. I did have the Clash's first album, and unfortunately that went by the wayside. I'd played it till it absolutely disintegrated. But the Stranglers were consisted of Hugh Cornwell on vocals and guitar, Jean-Jacques Bonnel on bass, and he's still leading the Stranglers. Then we had Jet Black on drums, who died a couple of years back, and Pete Greenfield. He was the keyboard player, and he loved his classical music and he loved his jazz. And on Golden Brown, you can see the little jazz influence, especially from Dave Brubeck's version of Take 5. You can just about hear Golden Brown in that song. So yeah, I think there was a little bit of the magpie there with Pete Greenfield, and but anyway, I'm glad he did. It's one of my favourite songs. The Stranglers, great original punk band. They were there at the start, where New Order were more post-punk. Pattie Smith. Now this is a record store day limited edition, and I got this a couple of years back. Massive fan of Pattie Smith. I did have a CDs, Easter and Horses, and Horses was one of the first Pattie Smith songs I heard, and I actually loved that. And Johnny Rotten used to kind of tease Pattie Smith, and he used to call her. He used to say when he's doing his gigs, maybe in the 100 Club, he said, I heard there's a bunch of hippies down the roundhouse singing about horses. Anyway, but Pattie Smith was great. Avant-garde punk again. Wrote some great songs, as I said, Easter and Horses. But she co-wrote with Bruce Springsteen that fantastic song called Because the Night. Bruce Springsteen wrote the song, didn't really finish it, and he gave it to Pattie Smith to finish, and she recorded it, and in 1978 she released Because the Night, and that is still one of my favourite songs to this day. This is a great record day. It's a double album. It's got the tracks on it. It's got a nice little picture of there on the back. And she's still going now, Pattie Smith. She's quite well, I don't know how I can say, but she's antagonistic, maybe, you know, to other people, and but she was a great writer. She was a great presenter, and definitely avant-garde. This album is curated from 1974 to 1996, and includes the tracks Gloria, which would have been a Van Morrison, Because the Night, which she co-wrote with Bruce Springsteen, Dancing Barefoot, People Have the Power, and it's just an absolute brilliant album, and I would definitely recommend it. It's on the Arista record label. It's Record Store Day, and I often buy a Record Store Day, you know, just to support the independent shops. Anyway, Pattie Smith, not so much punk, but she was in the middle of it, and being as antagonistic as what Johnny Rotten would have been. Back to CBGBs and the Talking Heads. This would have been 1985, when they were basically playing CBGBs back in about 1976, and David Byrne, yeah, is was the absolute protagonist of this band. He choreographed the dancing, he wrote the songs, and this was quite a polished album compared to their early days. And it was a big hit in the UK and a big hit in the USA. And I absolutely love this album, and I did love the Talking Heads. Again, it's me following this kind of avant-garde scene again, and avant-garde punk, I don't know. Anyway, Little Creatures consisted of And She Was, which was a big hit in the UK, Give Me Back My Name, Creatures of Love, This Lady Don't Mind, Perfect World, Stay Up Late, Side 2, Walk It Down, Television Man, and the other classic song, the last track on this album, which is called Little Creatures, was one of the biggest hits, The Road to Nowhere. Recorded in 1985. Absolutely love this album. Brilliant album, and highly recommend that one as well. Post-punk America. And I got to hear about a band called Husker. Three-piece band of hard-hitting post-punk. They'd have been there with bands like the Dead Kennedys, etc., Black Flag, and it's an EP. Most, as I said, were EPs released in 1983. Consisted of Bob Mould, Greg Norton, and the great Grant Hart on vocals, and he was the drummer. And we've lost Grant Hart. Not a lot to it. It's just a vinyl inside there, and I discovered Husker through a song called Diane, and I won't describe what Diane's about, but it's quite a hard, biting song about the murder of a young girl, and basically they tell the story of it, and they do it so well, and it's a protest song. They're not glorifying what happened. It was basically a warning too, and a band called Therapy, another kind of Irish post-punk band, covered that song as well, and I just loved Husker and then I've listened to them a lot, and the tracks now would be called Real World, It's Not Funny Anymore, First of the Last Calls, Lift Me, the great classic song Diane, and Out on a Limb on the Hypersonic Stereo label. Not a lot to it, but that's post-punk America, and you could have put them in the melting pot with Black Flag and the Dead Kennedys, etc. Great band, Husker Du. One of the early new wave bands who rocked it up and became absolute legends, and probably up there with the Beatles and the Rolling Stones as one of the greatest bands in the world. They've got a lot of critics as well. I'm not one of them. I love the music from their very first album, and that would have been U2. This album is called Rattle and Hum. If you remember, a few weeks back I did a Live and Loud. I didn't want to put that one in there. I kept that for the heavy stuff. Live and Loud, it was something for the heavy metal, as I said. But this was more new wave. But you know what? They covered quite a little bit of blues in here, because they've got B.B. King on one of the tracks called Love Come to Town. They're covering Bob Dylan's All Along the Watchtower. The Beatles, Helter Skelter. An absolute brilliant album. Released in 1988. And part of the new wave scene back in the early 80s. And I did like U2, and absolutely brilliant lineup. Obviously we got Bono on vocals, The Edge. Now he classed himself as Irish, but he was born in Wales to Welsh parents, and he's got a proper Welsh name as well, and his name is Dave Davis, but he's known as The Edge. Then we've got Adam Clayton on bass, and we've got Larry Mullen on drums. An absolute brilliant album. So the tracks here would be side one, Helter Skelter, Van Bremen's Land, Desire, that's the U2 classic, Hawkmoon 269, The Angel of Harlem, love that song, that's another U2 classic. When Love Comes to Town, they did that as a single with B.B. King, and B.B. King was one of my all-time great bluesmen. Seen B.B. King on 3 occasions, I think it was 3. Last track on side one, Heartland. Side 2 starts with the Bob Dylan song, All Along the Watchtower. Track 2, I still haven't found what I'm looking for, and that's another classic U2 song. Freedom for My People, Silver and Gold, Pride in the Name of Love, God Part 2, The Star Spangled Banner, Bullet in the Blue Sky, and All I Want Is You. It's a great album, it's a great live album, and it's got great inners in it with all the lyrics, and you can see great pictures on there of all their idols, including Elvis Presley, Billie Holiday. You can recognise some of them ones. We got B.B. King on there as well, and the second vinyl. Once again, we got quite a few pictures of U2. And it's got the lyric sheets as well, which is great. Again, this was a live stroke studio album, and I do like my live albums, and as I said, I didn't put this in the Live and Loud one. I didn't think it was appropriate, but there we have it. U2, Rattle and Hum, released in 1988, a groundbreaking album for U2. A bit later came the Joshua Tree, which was huge as well. So definitely recommend that one. That was the start of progressive new wave, is it? Okay, we're gonna go to a Welsh band now. The band were called The Alarm, and they were a North Wales band. I live in South Wales, so they were a bit further up. But we all loved The Alarm, and we all loved Mike Peters, the lead singer, and he's going through a very difficult time now with health. But there's no doubt that The Alarm during the 80s were a big band, and they had hits in the UK and they had hits in the USA. And this album, I would say, is my favourite album. It's a lot to do with South Wales and North Wales and the coal mines and industry. It came with a free single, and the single was called In New South Wales. And I just absolutely love The Alarm. And the tracks here would be Soak Me Down the River, The Rock, Devolution, Working Man Blues, Love Don't Come Easy, Hardland and Change 2. Side 2, No Frontiers, Scarlet, Where a Town Once Stood, Prison Without Bars, Rivers to Cross, and that great, I think it became a bit of an anthem in New South Wales. As I said, South Wales was part of the Industrial Revolution of Great Britain, and they sang with that. It's got a great inner in it. There's the lads. There's Mike Peters, but he was the main creator many of the songs for the Alarm, and a great frontman. They were classed as new wave, a bit punk. They were a bit rockabilly as well, and around the 1980s in the UK we had a genre called psychobilly, and very close to that, I would say, very close to that. And as I said, great little inner, and we've got the lyric sheets in the middle. And I think one of the most famous songs was The Guns of '68, and that was a big hit back in the early 80s. So that's the Alarm. We're going to go to New Zealand now, and this band became really famous, but they changed their name, and the band were called Split Ends, and I absolutely loved them. They were new wave, they were a bit punky, they were a bit out there with it, you know, and I can remember seeing them on Top of the Pops again when I was about 14, 15, and it was an absolute eye-opener to hear the songs. And the band became Crowded House, and it consisted of Neil Finn, Noel Finn, who created Crowded House, and Neil Finn did work with him for a little while, but he left and did his own little thing. We had Malcolm Green, Robert Giles, Edward Rayner, Nigel Griggs, Tim Finn, Noel Coombs, and sorry, it wasn't Noel Finn, it was Neil Finn, and this was their third album, and they had a few changes in personnel, but they, you know, when they became Crowded House, you know, all that kind of professionalism they took there, and the songwriting craft. Anyway, side one would be Boulder's Brass, My Mistake, Parent Fashion Love, Sugar and Spice, Without a Doubt. Side two, Crosswords, Charlie, Nice to Know, and Jamboree. New Zealand, post-punk, new wave, the Split Ends, who became Crowded House. And I got this album in a local shop down in my high street called Swansea Bay Records. Split Ends. Back in the early 80s, we had a phenomenon called Adamant. Now, Adamant came from a real hardcore punk scene. He was there back in 1976, 1977 with all the major punk bands. And his guitar player was a guy called Marco Pironi. And there's Adamant, and there's Marco Pironi. Again, a lot of people liked them, boys and girls, because when you listen to their music, it had that edge. It had a bit of rockabilly. The lead guitar player would play a big old Gretsch, and they had that big driving rockabilly sound. And you know, it was pop of the early 80s. Pop now, there's nowhere near hard edged, is it? But Adam and the Ants, they were an absolute brilliant band, great songwriters. The first album was called Dirk Wears White Socks, which I did have a cassette of that, but it's gone now. But they were very dramatic, they were very theatre, and Adamant was a great frontman, and they knew what they had to do to become big. And some of the tracks here would be Dog Eat Dog, Ant Music, Feed Me to the Lions, Los Lancheros, Ant Invasion, Killer in the Home. Side 2, Kings of the Wild Frontier, that was one of the early songs, that was, and that's an absolutely brilliant song. The Magnificent Five, Don't Be Square, Be There, Jolly Roger, Making History, and The Human Beings. Unbelievable. This album was released in 1980. It's 45 years old. And check Adamant out. You know, the early Adamant, and you can hear all that kind of rockabilly, psychobilly stuff going on there. Definitely new wave, definitely were, you know, creating something, and definitely edgy as well. Their videos were a bit cheesy, I suppose, you know, but they were trying to attract the young teenagers of the time. Anyway, don't think there's a lot inside here. There is. I haven't opened this for a while. It's the lyric sheets. Adamant. And this is called The Kings of the Wild Frontiers. And an absolute lovely album. Bought it brand new when it first came out in 1980. I'd have been probably 16, 17. And finally, one of my favourite Liverpool bands, and that's not the Beatles, but there was a band in the early 80s called the Christians. Once again, classed as new wave, with harmony singers to die for. Absolutely amazing harmony singers, very orchestral, and a lot of synthesizers, but you can actually hear acoustic guitars and everything on this, and it's got a great gatefold. There's the band, there's the lyrics. There's 3 of the members of the band there. And the tracks would have been called Forgotten Town, When the Finger Points, Born Again. Just these are just lovely songs. Ideal World, one of my favourite songs, and Save a Soul in Every Town. Side 2, and That's Why. Probably my favourite song on the whole album would be Hooverville. An absolute lovely, lovely, lovely song. I do implore you, if you've never heard of the Christians, have a listen, and have a listen to this album. It's just called The Christians. One in a Million and Sad Songs. I can honestly say there's not one filler on this album. These are all great songs of their time. I don't think there was a band around which were quite like the Christians. They were an absolute amazing band. Gary Christian on lead vocals, Russell Christian on saxophone, Harry Priestman, he was a big songwriter for them, and he's still about now. And they're just brilliant 3-piece. And I would definitely check these out. This was released, I would say 1983, circa 1983. Absolutely wonderful vocals, wonderful harmonies, and great songs, and of their time. Anyway, hope you've enjoyed episode 16 of my vinyl and music collection, which consisted of punk and new wave. Next week will be episode 17, and I'm still working out what I'm actually gonna do with that one. And but anyway, it'll be a bit of a surprise for you anyway. So anyway, take care, guys, and check in next week, and bye for now.